Thank you very much, Sue, and good morning, everybody. I'm very, very happy to be back here at ETAS, and I would like to say three thank yous. The first one indeed goes to Sue and her team for the invitation and for setting up this conference that I always love coming back to. The second thank you goes to my sponsors, Cambridge University Press, for bringing me here. And last but not least, a big thank you to you for getting up so early this morning and for coming here and joining us. A special welcome to those of you who've come directly from the apéro. Now let's get started. This is a session on teaching teenagers and teaching young adults, and it's a session that looks into some issues that I hope tie in with what Sarah said in her plenary yesterday. Issues that go beyond language, issues that have to do with relationships in the classroom, and that have to do with what Mel Stevik once referred to when he said about things that go on inside and between the learners in the classroom. I have a question for you, and I would like to ask you to just call out a few answers or your own answer to this question. When you think of teaching teenagers or young adults indeed, what do you find rewarding about teaching them? This was the moment when the seminar broke down. Sorry? When they smile. Thank you. That's a nice start to the session. Thank you very much.
They're
quite honest and direct.
They're honest and they're direct.
They keep you updated with technology.
Yeah.
Exactly. We can learn from them.
And vocabulary and phrases. Yeah.
Okay.
And dubbing.
Okay. Lovely.
They're generally more open to new ideas. They're more willing to try things out.
Okay, more open to change. Yep.
They are witty and they catch everything very quickly.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Did you hear that? The witty, they catch everything very quickly.
They teach you new words.
They teach you new words.
New
Okay.
words and usage.
Yeah. Teen language, right? Yeah. Okay. All words from the area of technology, I assume.
They're actively discovering life, exploring
Right.
the world.
Exploring the world, actively discovering the world. Yes.
They keep us on our toes. I think they keep us younger. They force us to.
Well, you have no reason to say that. That's my
Music,
Absolutely.
films, knowing that the
Absolutely.
stars, knowing the
Yeah.
TV, they keep us at
They
that
keep
level
us young.
because we have to.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks very much. That's a great and positive start to the session, because quite often when you talk about teaching teenagers and teaching young adults these days, quite a few colleagues react non-verbally, okay? Things like, oh. But that's a great start to the session, but I think that probably most of us, even if we do find teaching teenagers rewarding, as it were, probably most of us, at least occasionally also, feel like the colleague in this picture. It can be a big challenge. Let's not pretend everything is paradise when it comes to the teaching of teenagers. And I would like you to have a chat now with the person sitting next to you for a moment. And what I would like you to talk about is two things. First of all, think of the challenges that you come across when you teach teenagers, okay? And that's kind of like a silent minute, please, okay? Make a list, or at least a mental list of the challenges you come across when you teach teenage students, or you came across when you last taught them. Then have a chat with the person sitting next to you, and compare your findings and categorize them. So in a couple of minutes, I will be asking you for the categories you have found, and not the specific phenomena or the specific challenges. Mechanics clear? Here we go. was a fast silent minute. Silence, you know, silence by definition is when nobody speaks.
Not in our class.
The new definition of silence, the teenagers.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking my request for a silent minute so seriously. As the colleague said, it was a minute, but as perceived by teenagers. Can I just ask for a few of the categories you have found?
Material.
Materials? I'm sorry? Attitude?
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
behavior management.
Behavior management? Emotions?
Attention.
Assessment.
Attention or lack thereof?
Assessment.
Assessment? Okay. Huh? Absence?
I mean, they're either not there or
They're not there. Yeah, right, I got that, yeah. Interest, motivation, somebody said, probably the same category.
Relevance related to
Relevance related to
structure.
structures, grammatical structures.
No, not structure.
No.
The way you structure your lesson.
Okay,
So very
okay, lesson structure. Thank you.
Term of beliefs, so self-limiting beliefs that are...
Okay, their own beliefs about themselves and their own capabilities.
Their level of learning skills and strategies.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm sorry?
Cultural.
Cultural backgrounds. Okay, we could go on. I'd like to ask you for a moment to think about all the different categories of challenges we have heard here. How many of them are actually linguistic challenges? It's quite fascinating, isn't it? That whatever whatever was mentioned actually goes beyond language. And it is those challenges that we somehow need to deal with if we want to be successful as teachers of the language we are teaching. So I would like, in order to shed light onto where some of these challenges come from, I'd like to borrow a few of the recent findings into the teenage brain and what goes on in the teenage mind, the brain, as they are actually going into their teenage years and as they're becoming young adults. And we'll look a little bit at brain development here. Basically, this is a very reduced sort of illustration that only shows two structures of the brain. Two structures that play a major role in what actually happens in the teenage classroom. The first one is probably one of the most oldest structures of the human brain, the so-called limbic system. The limbic system, the pleasure-driven system in the brain. And the other one that is usually called the grey matter. I have no idea why it's pink in this image. It's the pink matter for this morning. The pink matter that is somehow responsible for what is usually called higher order thinking. So all kinds of logical thinking, reasoning, structural thinking, metacognition, metalinguistic thinking, etc., etc. That has all got to do with the cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is the skin over the brain. It's also called the neocortex. Neo suggests that it's the youngest part of the human brain from an evolutionary point of view. Young in terms of brain evolution is probably 4 million years. One part of that neocortex, or the frontal cortex, in particular, is all about mature thinking. And that's the kind of structure of the teenage brain or the young adult's brain that we would like to mature fast. And it doesn't. And it seems, and there is clear evidence that, and I'm not anybody who says that everything was better in the past. Of course, everything was better 20 years ago. But it's the structure that seems to take a lot more time these days to mature compared to what happened 20 or 30 years ago. And there are reasons for that, and we will go into that a little bit. Now, research into the teen brain actually shows that we have a dramatic change in the brain as they go into their teenage years, by which the part colored in red, the limbic system, takes over all of a sudden. And the limbic system is pleasure-driven. The limbic system is prone to risk-taking, interested in anything that is different from what parents and teachers keep going on about. They are interested in anything that is new, and they are particularly, of course, interested in the peer group. This is my friend and co-author James Zull, neurobiologist at Case Western University in Cleveland, Ohio, tells me this is very important from a biological point of view. It secures the survival of humankind. I'm not going to go into that, but we know what he means there. But it is also, especially when mixed with modern temptations, it's potentially a very dangerous phase in a young person's life, and we don't need to look very far when you look at newspapers, at media, etc., etc. You get things such as it's a serious phase. It's a phase that is potentially very, very harmful in a young person's life. And of course, when something like that happens, it's too late. So what we have is we have a mismatch between the development of the limbic system and that of the prefrontal cortex, which results in this lack of maturity and a lack of ability to run what-if simulations in their minds. I mean, we as adults have our temptations too, don't we? But normally an adult, before going for it, I think it was Groucho Marx who says the best way to fight temptations is to give in. Before we give in, we, at least theoretically, start thinking about possible consequences. Teens don't do that. They don't have this ability because of a lack of development in their prefrontal cortex. In other words, there is something that promises pleasure. There is something that promises adventure. There is something that promises fun. And they go for it and they don't think about it. This is also why they find it usually very, very difficult to learn from their mistakes, because they also cannot run past what-if simulations in their mind's eye. In other words, what would have happened if that just does not work out. People such as Jay Geert, and you can see these are rather recent publications, say that, Jeremy, you gave a talk about this in Montevideo once, that when it comes to adolescence, it's a time of great danger, but it's also a time of wonderful opportunity, and this is where we come in as teachers, of course. Look at what Jay Geert says. Society should realize that the teen years are a turning point for a life of peaceful citizenship, aggression, or in rare cases, radicalization. Across all cultures, adolescents are the most vulnerable to being recruited as soldiers and terrorists, as well as the most likely to be influenced to become teachers and engineers. When do drug gangs recruit their new members? When they are teenagers. When does the IS fish out for them? When they're teenagers. It's serious. The question is, what can we do? What can we do as teachers? Well, this doesn't work. Modals are very, very important when it comes to language teaching. You should, you ought to, you mustn't, you have to, you ought not. But we also know if we try and use them for educational interventions, we usually get an effect that could best be described as in one ear and out the other. Jeremy, you will know the next one. This doesn't work either. That's not how I usually go out on a Saturday night. My son helped me to Photoshop this for me. Do you know what I mean? The teacher who pretends they are part of the teenage group, the teacher who curries favor, as it were, with their teenagers. That's not what they not want, and that's not what they need, because they actually need, as we will see, they need healthy role models. They need people that guide them. They need people who give them guidance in a world that is becoming increasingly more difficult. And they need people who also occasionally say, stop. So, these things clearly don't work. But let's go a little bit more into this what happens in teenage years, and let's specifically look at what I said previously, a phenomenon that is described by some people, including Todd Kestin, as an artificially extended childhood. This suggests that actually 20 years ago, as I said, childhood finished earlier, teenage years finished earlier. People became mature earlier in their lives. This, by the way, I would really like to recommend this, is from a series of articles. They are all online and they are available for free in the Huffington Post by Todd Kestin. Excellent stuff based on very recent research. So Todd Kestin says, in this world of working parents and video games, in some families, teens can go through childhood and adolescence without a real sense of responsibility. And responsibility matters when it comes to maturity. They're occupied but not prepared for a successful life. Having responsibility for things that matter and that contribute to the welfare of others is part of the teen's preparation for the future. And I have no idea what figures would be like. This is obviously a study that comes from the United States. But he says that teens spend an average of 70% of their free time with peers and the media, making them their role models rather than their own parents or other healthy mentors in their lives. So what we're talking about is a lack, very often, a lack of healthy mentors. What we're talking about very often is a lack of having to take over responsibility, which young people had to do much earlier in their lives. I'll say again 20 years ago, okay? Now, this is what they're like. And I have to make a confession here, I'm just jealous because I can't do it using my two thumbs. I'm still like that. And that will change, I think, right? So, well, of course, there's nothing we can do about this. I'm not going to say we have to unite against social media or what have you. But we have to, as educators, I think we have to sort of objectively look at what's going on here in this teenage world and what kind of outcomes this has on their development. And I'm also not going to say I want to go back to Stone Age technology, although this might be memorable as a learning process. This is dogma, per se. Daniel Levitine has written an interesting book on the organized mind, thinking straight in the age of information overload. We are all somehow victims in some ways of an age of information overload, okay? And he says, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's worth thinking about this for a moment. Each time we check a Twitter feed or Facebook update, we encounter something novel and feel more connected socially in a kind of weird, impersonal cyber way. And then our brain gets a dollop of reward hormones telling us we have accomplished something. But remember, when you think of the two structures in the brain, okay? Remember, it's the dumb novelty-seeking portion of the brain driving the limbic system that introduces this feeling of pleasure, not the planning, scheduling, higher-level thought centers in the prefrontal cortex. Make no mistake, email, Facebook, and Twitter checking constitute a neural addiction. Right, and he goes on and he says, well, you know, I mean, they will of course claim, you know, I'm a multitasker. Right? If students study and watch TV, or probably you can see how dated this already is, you should say watch YouTube. Watch YouTube at the same time, for example, information from their schoolwork goes into the striatum, a region specialized for storing new procedures and skills, and not facts and ideas. Without the distraction of TV or YouTube or what have you, the information goes into the hippocampus, where it's organized and categorized in a variety of ways, making it easier to retrieve it. And we're not going to go into the medical details here, but what they actually activate is a component of the reward system. In other words, the more time I spend doing this, the more time I spend on social media, the more rewarded I feel actually. It's part of the reward perception, the striatum, and they do not activate the hippocampus, which is actually needed in order to sort out information and categorize information. And this is from a recent MIT study. People can't do multitasking very well, and when they say they can, they're deluding themselves. We can all multitask when it comes to mechanical things. We can make a phone call and at the same time make ourselves a cup of tea. But as soon as that phone call requires our full attention, we are not going to go on with our routine task, so to speak. Let's come back for a moment to this age of information overload. Again, Jay Beard looking at it and looking at what it means for the teenage and young adult world. Voluminous information is available, but the quality varies greatly. The skill of the future will be to critically evaluate a vast expanse of data, to synthesize content, and to apply that synthesis to real-world problem-solving. Educators should challenge the adolescent brain with these tasks. When you look at the plasticity of the human brain, it's never greater than in teenage years. That actually means that teens can and should be challenged in order to help them develop their brains properly. They will not do so by doing this only. Jay Beard, I like this quotation. Things that are cognitively stimulating are important. Watching talking cats on YouTube isn't as good for cognitive development as reading or taking classes. And yet we have a number of very serious colleagues who claim that this is what we should actually be doing in the language class. We should be using YouTube clips, and we should be using Twitter, and we should be using social media also in the language classroom. It's not in line with my own thinking. It's a decision we have to make as teachers, and we all make our decisions based on what we believe is right or isn't right. I think that we should actually challenge them with things that are different from what they have outside of the classroom in their free time. So I have three key messages for us in a way. The first one is help them develop what they potentially have up there in their brain. As I've said, the teenage brain has enormous capacity, but it needs to be developed. Robert Fisher, one of the world's leading experts in developing thinking skills, once said, thinking is not a natural function like sleeping, walking, eating, or talking. People do not necessarily become wiser as they become older. They only do if they train their brains, okay? So that's a key point for me. The second one ties in with what I said previously. I think we need to go, that's a suggestion, go beyond superficiality. When I look at materials for teenage students or for young adults, very often they mirror the kind of superficial world of the glitz and glamour of the film industry, and they're full of celebrities, etc., etc., etc. And a lot of it is extremely superficial. Jay Geert says the plasticity of the teenage brain suggests that constructive dialogues with teens about issues such as freedoms and responsibilities can influence development. So that's the second point. I mean, these are just two examples. Freedoms and responsibilities. So we're talking values here. And it is, we are living at a day and age that is rather difficult for young people. It's not easy actually to find orientation in this world of ours, in this world that we have created for our young people. And it seems actually a world without values quite often. When they watch what's going on out there in the world, and I'm not going to wallow in gloom and doom about it, but it's a world where, you know, having a solid system of values might actually be quite helpful for them. So that's the second point, foster the exploration of values. This is Mark Andrews. Taking learners seriously and not mistrusting them and not thinking the worst of them is one of the key variables in creating the conditions for good language learning. This, I think, ties in well with what Sarah said yesterday also, and what Earl Steelig has stressed for decades. The importance of the dialogue, the importance of respect, the importance of a healthy kind of classroom culture. And this is no other than Paulo Freire, who says if a structure doesn't permit dialogue, the structure must be changed. So what can we do? How can we help students notice we are taking them seriously? Through personalization, that's certainly one way. This is Ben Goldstein, exactly. Ben Goldstein, the conference that Jeremy and I went to, I think Michael Carrier was there too. Where's Michael? I can't see him actually. Ah, Michael, behind the camera. Normally he's always in front of the camera, but he's behind the camera. The LATSI conference in Montevideo, Ben Goldstein was talking about personalization, and he stressed the importance of personalization in the language classroom. But he also said, you know, I mean, everybody claims these days, well, you know, use my materials, and it's all about personalization. And he said, when you actually look at the activities in those materials, very often it's activities along the lines of, do you like bananas? So that's not the kind of personalization we are talking about, actually. If we want to personalize, we need to go a little bit, well, deeper, as it were. Earl Steelig often talked about depth in the foreign language classroom. Let's have a look at dialogue. Let's look into a classroom here, and let's see. This is from a classroom that was using, from a class where the teacher was using an activity that I think I developed with Mario Rindley years and years ago. It's basically students work in pairs, and each student writes down 3 speculations about the other person, okay? So if I were working with you, the teacher would say, okay, write down three things, 3 speculations about your colleague's time as a teenager, for example. And I would look at you and I would write down as a teenager, you often, etc., etc., etc. We write that without seeing each other's notes, and then partner A closes their eyes, and partner B slowly reads out the first speculation to A. And it's an activity that works extremely well because having their eyes closed helps people to focus on what the other person is saying. Switching off the visual channel every now and then helps to get rid of all kinds of distraction and makes people think more. And then afterwards they talk about what was right and what was wrong, etc., etc., etc. Now the teacher in this class did exactly that, and then tried to engage students in a meta discussion. And you will see the group is probably B1 or something like that. And the teacher said, "Well, what do you think? Did you think of the activity?" And student 1 says, "It's fascinating. Listen to someone saying something about you when your eyes are not open." The teacher says, "Why is that?" "I don't know. Maybe when I don't look at a person, not look in their eyes, I'm more..." And the student does something like this, and the teacher says, "Focused?" And the student says, "Yes, focused." But he doesn't really understand. His focus is, and the teacher goes, "Concentrate." "Yes, yes, concentrated. I think that's true. More concentrated. Focused. Yes, that's right." For me, it was a feeling of, and he makes a gesture to his partner's head, more or less, like to know what's going on in Maria's head. The teacher says, understanding the other person intuitively. Yes, exactly, it's interesting. Sometimes I know very good what someone is thinking. Me too, thinking or feeling. Is this helpful? Yes, helpful, very helpful. When you know what someone is thinking, you can help them. You can understand them better. It's good for friendship, good for give a person the feeling that you like the person. And then another student says, "But not always." It's not always good. Sometimes I think I know what another person thinks, but it's not true. It's just I'm thinking it, not their thinking, my thinking. So there's a lot going on in terms of interesting thoughts. I mean, they're talking about projections, and they're talking about intuitions, and they're talking about all kinds of highly interesting psychological phenomena and processes. And they are, and this is a key point, not talking about liking or not bananas. They are actually talking about something that is real for them because they've just gone through this phase themselves in the classroom. Here is another example. I'll skip these. The teacher says, ask student 2 if she came by car tonight. Did you come by car tonight? Did you come? The teacher says, good. Ask her if she has a brother. At this moment, student 2 says, yes, I did. Answering the drill question up there, did you come by car tonight? Okay? Yes, I did. Do you have a brother? Yes. Do you have, the teacher says, or have you got? Very good. Ask her if she is a teacher. Do you a teacher? No. Are you? Are you a teacher? Are you a teacher? Yes. Yes, I am. Yes, I am is the answer. Okay. You can also do it with answers. Doesn't matter. Ask student 6 if she works in an office. Do you work? Do you work in an office? No, work at home. That's not correct, but it doesn't matter. Ask student 8 if she, etc., etc., etc. Now, obviously, and I don't want to ridicule the colleague, there are phases in a classroom, even when a quick drill makes some sense, shall we say. But what is amazing here, isn't it, that there are moments when students confuse this and think, these questions are real, I want to give an answer. And like here in this case, the teacher says, that's not correct, but it doesn't matter. Okay? So what we have is the opposite of personalization. We have language only and language structure only, devoid of any real meaning. And of course, if you think of what this makes to the student, what this does to the student's inner world, and you compare that with something we had here previously, that is a very, very different thing. Of course, we have to live with messy language if we go for this. Of course, not every sentence will be beautifully crafted, without errors, etc., etc. As Anita, I think, Galberg says, sequences are initiated by trials in both speech and gesture, followed by other repetition, often leading to overlapping synchronized speech and gesture, followed by new repetitions by learners during integration, occasionally followed by further repetition of the original sequence. Typically, interlocutors repeat both gestures and speech until both parties are satisfied that a common understanding has been reached. But this is the key point here. Just like native speakers, learners are keen to keep the floor, to save face and so on. And just like native speakers, they prefer to find solutions to the problems without interrupting fluency if possible, and without overtly appealing for help. However, self-repair will often be impossible for learners, even when they do manage to find a certain locution or approximation, and learners therefore often must resort to interactive multimodal solutions. That's why the hand gestures and the facial expressions and all that are so important in personalization, in moments in the classroom when talk becomes real and we're not just talking about, well, liking bananas, okay? There we go. Question is, I've already said, how can we teach values? Well, not through modals, I've already said that. Okay? Modals don't really work because they often achieve the opposite of what we do. Even my little grandson, when I say, don't do that, all he hears is, do that. And teenagers, of course, have a lot more intuitive polarity responses in them. So they can react very strongly if we use too many of those directive modals up there. So what can we do? Well, first of all, through modeling. As teachers, we are significant others. If I want my students to become good, empathetic listeners, for example, I have to show them, through my own model of interaction, what it's like to be a good, empathetic listener. And secondly, through stories. Stories have been used in all cultures and in all countries for centuries to pass on to the next generation the values that are important to a society, and that's in so-called primitive cultures and in highly developed cultures. Stories are all extremely important. This is from a book I would love to recommend. I'm sorry it doesn't have a copyright line up there. This is from Lisa Cron's book, Wired for Story. Our brain is wired for story. And she says, the reason our already overloaded brain devotes so much precious time and space to allowing us to get lost in a story is that without stories we'd be toast. Stories allow us to stimulate intensive experiences without actually having to live through them. This was a matter of life and death back in the Stone Age, when if you waited for experience to teach you that the rustling in the bushes was actually a lion looking for lunch, you'd end up the main course. Gives me a chance to show off one of my favorite lion shots. All right. Lisa Cron, and here's her name also. It's even more crucial now because once we mastered the physical world, our brain evolved to tackle something far trickier, the social realm. Story evolved as a way to explore our own mind and the mind of others, as a sort of dress rehearsal for the future. As a result, story helps us survive, not only in the life and death physical sense, but also in a life well-lived social sense. Jeremy was talking about CLIL in his session yesterday, content and language integrated learning. I would like to stress here that for me, CLIL is not just about physics and biology and I don't know, chemistry, science. For me, clear content is also important content in terms also, for example, of stories that conveys important values. Content that helps young people, that helps teenagers with growing up and becoming more mature and developing their brain potential. So I would like to suggest that when we talk about the CLIL, we do not only use content from those technical subjects as it often happens, and also go into, well, humanities if you want. My third point is about self-esteem. When it comes to the teaching of teenagers, it comes to the teaching of young adults, self-esteem, or lack thereof, plays a crucial role. And this may be surprising for some of us, because when you look at teenagers these days, they seem so cool. What could be cooler than a group of, I don't know, 16, 17-year-olds or 15-year-olds, especially when they are among themselves, when they are in the peer group? Well, there is very, very serious research that actually shows, rather convincingly, that this coolness is often simply a defense mechanism. That's what they use in order to cover up their insecurities, and deep down there are often huge areas of insecurity. So a lack of self-esteem and self-worth, and there are various studies that show that can lead to an attitude of defensiveness. Now defensiveness, of course, in its positive form, it's being together with others in the peer group, having fun and being cool. But defensiveness can be a lot more serious. Defensiveness can be about rebelling, resisting, provoking. That's when teachers suffer, of course. It can be about lying, cheating, copying. Somebody said not being present, so playing truant, or what have you. And down to, I'm not going to read all of them out, but down to very, very serious consequences, serious behavioral issues that can have serious and sometimes even fatal consequences, like extreme cases of drug addiction and alcohol abuse. Now, there's probably no country where more has been done. Anybody here from California? Okay. There's no other country in the world where more has been done to boost students' self-esteem. Would you agree? You give me a head nod. Than in California. In many schools in California, actually, teachers have tried for years to use those affirmation programs, to use those self-esteem programs to help young people with their self-esteem. And in recent years, there has been an enormous amount of research done into those programs. And unfortunately, although teachers tried extremely hard, the results are not very, very positive. Aaron Goodman, I think this was an article in the Time magazine, if I'm not wrong, says the quest for greater self-esteem can leave people feeling empty and dissatisfied. A little anecdote, if I may, an embarrassing anecdote about myself when I was 13. When I was 13, that's not embarrassing, I had, and I know you won't believe me, curly blonde hair. Not like the graveyard blonde that I have now, okay? Curly blonde hair. And I thought it was ugly. Not that it was blonde, but that it was curly. While all my friends had straight hair, I had curly hair. I thought it was absolutely ugly. When I look at photos of it now, I think, hey, I look quite cool. But, I was deeply convinced I was ugly. So, I had to think of a strategy. And the strategy was hair gel. I bought mountains of hair gel, okay? And I remember every morning, because I'm going to school, putting on these mountains of hair gel, and of course it didn't help. Then I discovered, I don't know if anybody knows what that is, I discovered the hairnet. You know what a hairnet is? Oh, you're learning something in this plenary today, aren't you? I discovered the hairnet. I put on a net over my head, and it, you know, it has those sort of like pieces that you tie around your hair. I went to bed every night, you know, straightening my hair. Don't laugh, it was serious. In the morning, I couldn't wait to go to the mirror, and I looked into the mirror, and I saw the fascinating result, another red streak across my forehead. That was it. Had somebody told me in those days, well, you have to look in the mirror and you have to tell yourself, you look awesome, it wouldn't have worked. So that's a serious thing, that those self-affirmations don't work, and the more we think about self, the less actually we develop, it seems, our self-esteem. The same source, Aaron Goodman, when people chase after a stronger sense of self-worth, it becomes their ultimate goal, leading them to sacrifice other aspirations, such as learning or doing what's good for others. A far better way to bolster your sense of self-worth is, ironically, to think about yourself less. So that's my third message here. And it's quite interesting, there are actually studies that show that teenagers who are involved in kind of community projects, helping other people who have responsibilities, those young people mature faster. Now that's not something we can do as teachers. We cannot always, you know, set up community projects, what have you. Some teachers do. But at least I think we need to make decisions on the time we spend with our students. I think we are well advised to see this time as something that is quality time, rather than just getting them to do this in our lessons. Now, I have another 9 minutes because we started later, okay? So I'd like to show you a few examples of content. So content and language integrated learning in a different way. A few examples of content that I believe might be better able to actually get students to personalize, to become responsible because they want to say something, because the content is relevant. Somebody said this previously, relevant content. And also where they, well, do not learn to take over more responsibility, but where they start thinking about responsibility in life, where they start thinking about their own role in society and in the classroom and in whatever, at school and whatever communities there are. This is a clipping from a magazine, basically. It's about a TV show in the UK, I've forgotten the name of it, where the host invited the audience to take part in a rather mundane activity. And it's not something, this is not a text that you would read for pleasure in your free time. But kids often like texts that have this wow effect, you know? So he invited people to take part in this rather mundane activity, to build a house made of Lego bricks. Right. 1,200 people joined in, by the way. And they used 3.3 million Lego pieces to create this house made of Lego bricks. And it had everything. It had a bathroom made of Lego and a kitchen made of Lego, and even a toilet made of Lego, and there was even a cat in the living room made of Lego. Now the question is, of course, if you have a text like this, it's mundane. How do I get students to actually think about values? How do I initiate this value thinking if they have a text like this? Well, by activating their thinking skills. And I would like to suggest 3 things here: matching, rank ordering, and comparing. So what we have here is we have quotations, we have values, certain social values, working together, being creative, having fun and caring for others. Now we have quotations, and this is low level because it's so much easier to talk to people about concepts, sophisticated concepts such as values and what have you, when they are on C1 level. But with somebody who's on A2, say, it's a lot more difficult to initiate those thinking processes. So here we have quotations. We really enjoyed this, we laughed a lot. The idea of building a Lego cat was really interesting. I love being with so many people doing the same thing. And I think it's great that they donated. That's the story, the ending of the story I forgot to mention. Well, when the Lego house was done, actually, the authorities said that they had to take down the house again. And then people started to write protest letters and wanted the house not to be taken down. They did have to take it down, but the happy ending is they donated all those 3.3 million Lego pieces to charity for children. Okay? So the last quotation is, I think it's great that they donated the Legos to a charity for children. So they match, and matching, of course, when you look at different taxonomies of thinking skills, matching is a basic thinking skill. But now rank ordering, and that's actually a higher order thinking skill. Because now you can ask them to look at these values up here and say, well, which of them is the most important for you? Put a 1 next to it. Which is second most important? Etc., etc., etc. They rank order, and then they compare. They talk about what's important for them. And the key point here, again, of course the teacher can also join in now, but there is no right or wrong. It's not that one of these values the teacher has a right to say is more important than the other ones, because they are exploring values, they are talking about values, but they will be listening very carefully to one another. So in other words, they will be learning from one another in this phase. Not only language, but also attitudes and attitudes concerning values. We could then carry on by talking, well, think about feeling at home. What does feeling at home mean for you? So when we talk language-wise about houses and homes, of course, we talk about different rooms in a house, and we talk about furniture and this and that. All that is very, very important. But going a little bit deeper here, so to speak, would be about talking about what does feeling at home feel like. And it could be somebody says, well, for me, you know, home is our living room because we have a flat screen TV. Fine. But somebody else might also say, home is for me, is when I talk to my mom about life, because I love talking to my mom about life. Things like that. And I might also want to show you, we've got a few more minutes, very briefly, an example of, here, these photo stories are usually popular with kids. What we have here, kids going through this park, and they actually meet this homeless guy. So now we're going really deep, because we're talking about building a Lego house, a very mundane thing, talking about what does it mean for you to feel at home. But now we're talking about somebody who doesn't have a home, a homeless guy. And we're getting reactions that might not be unusual, you know, when it comes to teenagers. The girls, who are usually more mature at this age, this changes later in life. The girls actually, they really feel sorry for this guy, this homeless guy. And the boy said, yeah, you're probably right, but so what? Okay? And so the Olivia says, let's go and talk to him. And Ryan says, hold on, do you think that's a good idea? Megan, what do you mean? He's poor, but that doesn't mean he's dangerous. Okay, maybe not dangerous. He's probably not very nice though. Maybe he needs help. Now think of what I said previously. Think of the two structures in the brain, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. What I said was we need the activation of the prefrontal cortex in the teenage classroom. So every now and then, ask them what if, or ask them what's going to come next based on a situation like this one here. So, for example, work in pairs, discuss what happens next in the story, write down your own ideas. I have a video now that I'm going to skip. Let me just sum this up. We've been looking at recent neuroscientific findings into the workings of the teenage brain. We've been looking at the mismatch in the development of the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, at risk-taking behavior among teenagers and the lack of the ability to foresee possible consequences of their risky behavior because they want to go for what they think gives them pleasure. I have suggested 3 key points to take on board when you think personalization is important. The first one, developing their thinking skills. The second one, getting them to explore values. And the third one, helping them to develop their self-esteem. And we have looked at a few practical examples here. This is something, I mean, if you're interested in literature, just talk to me afterwards. I can send you a bibliography. Thank you very much.